let's pop to the next slide because I'm really excited to talk to you guys about this session and also a little bit more about Daniel's background. You can pop me over, Daniel.
Sorry, I was showcasing my Talavera mug. That's in my
I
desk.
see
Thank
that
you,
it's
Mara.
getting quite a lot of love in the chat
Yeah,
as it
yeah.
happens.
I'm from Mexico, so represent
Everyone is
Mexico
raising a
here.
toast to you and to your mug. So as we are admiring the mug, we are also getting really excited to talk about tackling complicated B2B problems, and specifically this kind of business case and how there are specific and really effective innovation strategies that you can use in this area to make sure that you're not developing unsuitable products and making sure that they're really aligned to that specific customer use case. So that's what we're going to talk about today. There is also a special bonus. I told you this one was special. Everyone who attends today is going to receive a copy of Daniel's B2B assessment. We're going to offer it to all of you for free. So thank you so much, Daniel, for your generosity. We're going to be sharing that towards the end of the session. So keep an eye out in the chat box. We will post it in there for you to download, and it's incredibly valuable. So Daniel is a product executive, an advisor, an author. He's got over 20 years of product experience. Again, his expertise and his passion and his knowledge is really focused on B2B innovation. And that extensive commitment has made him a tremendously trusted leader in the space, so much so that he has coached over 1,500 product leaders. He's especially talented in aligning full teams on how they can build clarity and ensure that they have incredibly successful products, which is what we all want. We want to do good work. We want to hit really positive ROI. So absolutely thrilled to have you with us today, Daniel. I'll send it over to you for a further introduction and you can share more.
Thank you so much, Georgina. That's a fantastic introduction. I hope I can live up to that. Okay, well, thanks everybody for coming. Welcome. I am going to run through a few slides and we'll leave space for Q&A at the end. So make sure you put your questions in the chat box, please. Just to round up about my background and my expertise. So as Georgina said, I'm a product exec turned author and advisor. Some of the things that I've done in my career, just to give you a sense of where I'm coming with the presentation today. I'm an author of the best-selling book, The B2B Innovators Map, which is focused specifically on the early stages of innovation of complex B2B solutions, enterprise, IoT, industrial type of things. I'm also a Pragmatic Institute partner now with our upcoming workshop, which is based on my book, and I'm super, super excited about the launch. I'm a board advisor for companies. I'm also a mentor at 2 climate tech startups. Climate tech, electrification is one of my passions. And so I've worked in that space before, and I advise a lot of startups on how to create a winning product strategy for that. From a corporate perspective, I'd be a VP, head of IoT at Ericsson, running the innovation lab in Silicon Valley for 5G. I've also worked at smaller companies. I was head of products at STEM, which is a fast-growing energy storage company in Silicon Valley. And one of my passions is sharing my expertise and my mistakes so you don't make the same mistakes. So I've trained a lot of folks through my online courses, but I've also taught at Stanford University continuing studies for over 6 years, teaching product strategy for IoT and complex B2B solutions. So everything that I'm going to tell you today comes from my experience, and everything that I'm going to tell you here, I lived, and I have the scars to prove it. So let's talk about what are some of the challenges that I see the most in B2B product innovation. When I talk to companies as an advisor, to the CEOs, or as a consultant, or as a head of product, usually what I see is that most companies view innovation as a black box, meaning innovation is just some magic procedure where an idea comes in and then money comes out on the other end. And so no wonder that a lot of companies struggle with advancing products and creating successful products, because the understanding on how to go from idea to successful products is very blurry. In B2C, which is what we hear the most in product management out there, it is somewhat simpler. When you add the complexities of B2B, where you have multiple buyers and sales teams and regulations and deployments, it is very, very complex. And so the result of having a black box as your innovation, North Star, there's always confusion about what to do next. You don't really know a step-by-step process. So therefore, it's like, well, what do we do next? We should do discovery. Oh no, we should do prototypes. We should do the next lean thing. We should do agile, right? What do you do? And there's always constant pivots to change the latest shiny object because there is no clear direction on how to advance an idea forward. So any new idea just looks better and it causes a lot of pivots. And that creates a lot of lack of trust and support from your stakeholders, because if you are leading product as an innovator, then they see you just bouncing around, burning their cash and their funding, and you're not making progress. So you lose a lot of that support. And so what happens is the result is that your company wastes a lot of time and money building products no customer needs. That is the number one challenge that I hear from B2B product leaders is, yes, we build these projects or these products, but nobody wanted it. The idea came from one particular customer and we built it for them and nobody bought it, right? So that's a big problem. And that, of course, impacts into the team morale, because there's nothing more frustrated for a product team that's spending a year or 2 years pouring your soul on building something, and it turns out that nobody wanted it. And so it's very demoralizing. So we have to figure out a way of minimizing that risk. And so I'm going to show you a few techniques that I've included in my book and in the workshop that we'll talk more about. So before I go into some of the requirements here, I just want to ask if this idea of the black box resonates with anybody. Is anybody familiar with that? Has experienced the confusion of not sure where to go? Just put it in the comments. I'd like to see it. I'll continue moving forward, but I'll keep my eye on those comments. So how do you navigate complex B solutions? Well, it is very challenging because you require a two-sided approach. You need an approach that focuses on the market to make sure that you're building something customers need, but also you need to focus internally, making sure that your stakeholders, your leadership team is aligned on how you are going to advance that innovation. And so I'm going to share here with you some of the 4 most common challenges that I see. So in order to navigate complex B2B solutions, you need to have alignment on how you're going to approach that innovation. Like, what does that look like, right? It's difficult for your stakeholders and leadership team to be behind you if they don't really know how you're going to go about it. Then, believe it or not, clarifying what specific problem you're going to solve is key. And I would say 80% of the companies that I talk to struggle with that part, and we're going to talk about that. Once you understand what problem you're going to solve, the next pitfall is, who do you solve it for? Most companies say, well, it's for everybody, or this huge market, or it can have all these applications, but that makes it really difficult to make progress towards initial successful innovation projects, and I'll tell you why. And the last one that I want to share is, once you know what problem you're solving and who you're solving it for, is how do you reduce the risk of building the wrong product? Because see, understanding what the problem is that you're trying to solve is the first step, but that doesn't mean that whatever you build is going to be the right thing. So that's why you have to iterate and reduce that risk through several innovations techniques that we're going to talk about here. So in the next of the presentation, I'm going to give you a few tips on how to address each one of these. Now, I want to start with how to approach innovation. Now, innovation, again, is not a black box, and it can be defined through a series of steps. So in the book, I wrote the B2B Innovators Map, which is shown here in the slide for you. Now, the B2B Innovator Map is a framework that has the necessary steps to go from early idea to early customers. Now, every new innovation, every new product goes through these stages, whether you know it or not, right? But when you actually put a name on this and understand the transitions, it makes it a lot easier not only to execute, but to gain the support of your company. Now, these 6 stages are strategic alignment, market discovery, user discovery, solution planning, prototyping, and early adopter. Now, notice that there are arrows that go forward and backwards. So the idea of this framework is that it's not waterfall. You don't just go from top to bottom. You have to iterate until you are able to get the criteria to move to the next stage. And it's okay to move back if you are not meeting the criteria to advance. That moving back and forth very quickly is what accelerates innovation. It might seem that it's faster just to build something and see what sticks, but that most likely is going to result in something their customers don't want. But if you're iterating and you're testing and you're being customer-centric, then you'll make a lot more progress. Now, I am going to touch on a few of these items because we don't have a lot of time. So I'm going to touch on the problems that I mentioned before. By the way, as Georgina mentioned, for attending the webinar, we're going to share with you my B2B Product Innovation Assessment. And this is a document, it's a checklist that has all the things that you need to complete in order to minimize the risk of building the wrong product. And it's based on the B2B Innovators Map. And I wish I had something like this because in retrospect, the products that I built that failed, I could go back to this checklist and see, oh, I didn't do this, I didn't do this, I didn't do this, right? And so this is a great tool to work with your team to figure out, are we covering all these different areas and are there any gaps that could derail our product? So stay at the end and we'll share with you this bonus. Okay, so the first item that we talked about was aligning on the problem to solve, and that's where the framework starts. When I wrote the book, the first stage that I wrote was a strategic alignment, and the goal here was to agree with your leadership team on what problem you're solving. And it sounds basic, but it turns out that the majority of companies cannot articulate what problem they are solving for their customer. I often talk to customers that say, we have this AI solution, or we have this platform, or we have, those are not problems, those are solutions. And you need to understand what's the core pain in the words of your customer that they want solved, and then you can figure that out. And so agreeing on what is it that you're going to pursue, it is definitely the first step, and that's what happens in the strategic alignment stage. Now, here, one of the things that you need to come up with is a problem statement of that agreement of a problem. So what does a problem statement look like? So here are some examples. We help companies save money on their electricity bill. So let's say that you are in the electricity business and you want to say, we are building solutions to help companies save money on their electricity bill. A statement like this is enough to guide your innovation and product team to start figuring out what a potential solution could be. But this gives you a strategic direction. It's not anything, it's saving money on electricity bill. Now, notice that it doesn't say how to save money, what companies, how much money, what their electricity bill means, right? That's for the innovation team to discuss and discover later. But in terms of alignment, it's very, very helpful to have something like this. A couple more examples. We help sales teams increase the health of their pipeline. Again, it doesn't say what about sales teams, what does increase mean, what is health, okay? But it gives you directionally a great place to start. Last example, we help buildings become more resilient. It's very clear, right? So I encourage you to spend time working with your team and your leadership team and aligning on what problem you're going to solve for the customer. And if you're already working on some product, try to work backwards and articulate this problem. In fact, I would like to hear from you. I would like to ask you, what customer problem are you solving today? So if you're working on a product, do you mind entering in the chat? I would like to hear from you. What problem are you solving today? We'll take 5 seconds to do this. I'm going to look at the chat here. And I'm going to drink coffee from my mug.
These are some good ones in here already.
Do
Do you want to pick a couple that you like? They're coming in fast.
Yeah. So for example, Jillian says eliminating silos in data recovery. Yeah, that's a good one. We help companies capture, implement, and report on their improvement efforts from Ryan. Yeah, that's good. We help companies provide a vehicle for their employees to save for retirement. Yeah, those are great. I think, Georgina, your audience is way more sophisticated than most of the talks I do, because usually I have to jump in and correct a bunch of them. Excellent.
I have to say these are all very, very strong problem statements. So I hope that everyone on the call chats about these regularly with their team, because I can tell that everyone who's joined us today knows the answer. And so I wonder if the rest of the organization does too.
Exactly. And that was going to be my next question, is if you ask 3 people in your organization, would they come up with the same statement, right? So it's an opportunity to open up that discussion and make sure that everybody's on the same page. Okay, well, thank you for that. I'm going to move on. So we talked about how to approach innovation, try to have a step-by-step disciplined approach. And here we're talking about the B2B Innovators Map, focus on what problem to solve. So the next thing is, who are you solving for? We're starting to get deeper and say, who has this problem? And so here we're moving to the next stage of the B2B Innovators Map, which is market discovery. The goal of the market discovery stage is to identify the type of company that you're going to be solving a problem for, and then who inside that company is tasked with solving that problem. Because remember, in B2B, even though we're selling to companies, ultimately you're selling to people. So who in the organization has that pain that needs solving? Let me explain a little bit more, okay? So we have to be specific, right? When I say who, I don't mean Joe, right? I mean the characteristics of your ideal customer profile, their job description, things like that, okay? So we have to dive deeper and understand who is tasked to solve that problem. So one thing that I've learned in terms of navigating the complexity of these problems is breaking the problem apart in smaller pieces. And I found that one of the challenges in B2B is understanding the enterprise customers. So here's a nomenclature that I've used that I found really, really helpful. So first of all, you have a customer. When I say customer, it really means a company, right? Because in B2B, your customer is a company, a logo, as folks in sales like to say. So Walmart is a customer, or Ford is a customer, or ABB is a customer, or Pragmatic is a customer. And so then the customer has a desired business outcome. They have a challenge that they need to solve that is going to impact their business. And this is a big difference with B2C, right? This is all about impacting the business. Now, to solve that business outcome, the company might do many things, services, projects, multiple vendors, and you're just maybe part of it, right? So in B2B, you're not going to be the overarching solution. So the company has a desired business outcome, and then you have what I call the champion. The champion is the person responsible for delivering on that business outcome. Now, you probably heard in B2B that there's a buyer and a user. I call it a champion instead of a buyer because at this stage, early in the innovation stage, you really don't have buyers. You need a partner. You need somebody to champion your untested solution and to break through the company. That's why I call them champions, because they're not quite buyers, okay? Then that champion will work with a lot of different users who will do the day-to-day of the application of your product in order to deliver that outcome. And then, of course, there's a buying committee. There's people that might include champion and buyers, and they are going to decide what to buy. So when you're thinking about enterprise customers and who you're solving for, you have to think about this whole ecosystem. The key tip that I want to give you is when you're launching a new product, you have to focus on the champion. The champion is the most important part because they are the ones who have the pain and they are the ones you're solving for. The users, yes, they provide very valuable elements and insights, but The problem you're solving is for the champion. So focus always on the champion and align with your company that you're going to go after a particular champion. Now, this in the market discovery stage, I said, well, you have to decide who has the pain and then what type of company they work on. And this is where defining a target market is critical. I have to say this is the second biggest challenge that I see when I talk to companies, big and small, is not being focused enough. They want to sell something that's for everybody, or it's too big of a market because of fear of missing out, or just because they have channels, etc. And so I found that it's very important to be as narrow as possible, because then you can find what I call convergence of pain. If you have 5, 8, 10 people, 10 companies that have the same pain in the same industry, then you have a potential validation of the market. Now, when I say a target market, what does that mean? So I'll give you my definition for target market. The target market has 5 components. First one is the industry that you're going to target, the company size, the geography, the champion role. See, the champion himself or herself is going to be part of this definition. And then the use case that you're going to be addressing. So these 5 components are very, very important. So I'm going to give you an example of how this applies so that would make a lot more sense. So I'm going to give you an example of an energy storage company. I'm very passionate about electrification, and I used to work at an energy storage company. So let's think about this. By energy storage, I mean companies that make big commercial batteries that are installed in buildings or on the grid. So let's say that you are the product manager or innovator leader for an energy storage company. You're trying to figure out what is a right target market. So thinking about the 5 components, first, of course, you have to agree with your company what problem you are exploring. In this particular example, I say, we help buildings be more resilient. But now notice, what do we mean by buildings? Buildings is too broad of a category, and it might take you in multiple directions, because a skyscraper is different than a McDonald's versus a Walmart type of a building versus a school versus a hospital. All those are buildings, but the characteristics are radically different. Okay, so this is where we go into the 5 criteria. I'm going to list them quickly, and then I'll go back to explain them. So let's say that an example target market could be in the industry, hospitality, company size 1 billion plus, geography United States, the champion role, director of operations, the use case, backup power. So let me go back and walk you through what this example looks like. So the target market here is, let's say the industry is the hospitality industry, because they have these big batteries that you want to sell. So the hospitality could be a good one. But notice that I'm going deeper. I'm saying focus on hotels with 200 plus rooms. Hospitality, again, is too broad, right? You can have like a hotel like the Bellagio, or you can have like a business hotel like a Quinta. Well, which ones? Those are different, and the approach is going to be different. So in this particular example, you're saying on hotels with 200 plus rooms. That's pretty big. Then the company size. This is the company that owns the hotels. And you're saying, I want to work with companies that have $1 billion plus revenue a year, and they have 20 plus hotels in their portfolio. So it's important to notice how I'm quantifying things. I'm not saying large companies or small companies. I'm saying $1 billion plus, 20 plus hotels. So it's very tangible, and it helps you have those discussions with your team. Notice that by saying I'm going to go with big companies and 20 plus hotels in the portfolio, I'm already thinking that that's going to require portfolio views and fleet management of our software. So your software or hardware starts taking different dimensions. Notice the next one is geography. And in geography, I'm saying United States. And this is very important, especially if you're in highly regulated industries, because developing the regulations and making sure your product is compliant is going to take a lot of development time. So if you have one customer in the United States, one in Japan, one in Italy, it might require you to develop a lot of functionality to develop compliance, and that might slow you down at the beginning. So again, to move faster and minimize risk, Just focus. Later, you'll be able to expand, but focusing is going to help you accelerate. Then the champion role, who within these hotels is responsible for making buildings more resilient. Oh, you find that is the director of operations. So that's who you're going to target. And then the use case is very important because technology can do a lot of things. Like in this case, batteries, they can do backup power, they can do solar firming, they can do demand response, they can do EV charging. But again, those are very different applications. And so because the goal is to be more resilient, maybe you decide that backup power is the solution you're going to provide. And with this very specific target market, then you can start doing a lot of the discovery and prototyping that we're going to talk about in a second, that is going to help you figure out if you have a potential. But notice how targeted it is, okay? Very good. I'm going to move on. I see there's some questions about this. Great, we'll keep them at the end. Okay, so we talked about how to approach innovation, the problem to solve, who to solve it for. So now the last one is, how do you reduce the risk of building the wrong product? So you can see that in the B2B Innovator Map, I'm skipping some steps, right? I'm skipping user discovery, solution planning. Again, in the workshop, we cover those in a lot of detail. But for here, I want to go into the prototyping stage. The goal of the prototyping stage is to start building small prototypes that can help you validate whether you're building the right product. Because remember what I said, the fact that you understand the customer pain, which should come from strategic alignment, market discovery, and user discovery, the fact that you understand the customer's pains doesn't mean that whatever you build is going to be aligned with what they want. So you have to start working with customers in that specific target market to validate whether your solution would fit their needs, okay? And that's where the prototyping stage is all about. So let me tell you a few things about that. Now, when you're building prototypes, you're really maximizing your chances of building the right product because you are not spending 6 months or a year on fully developing a product and see if they like it. You are iterating, you're working in an iterative way, building little chunks, and then as you get more validation, then you can actually build some of that product. And that way, you are testing with your customers all the time to ensure that what you're building is the right thing. Now, when you are doing this tests with prototypes, you're testing for 3 things. And this is a framework that was popularized by a company called IDEO. And it talks about desirability, viability, and feasibility. Meaning that for a product to have better chances of success, it needs to be desirable, it needs to be viable, and needs to be feasible. So what does that mean? Desirability really means, does the market want your product? So at this point, hopefully you've done a lot of discovery to know that the pain that you're exploring is widely available in the market and your product could fix it. So ideally you have desirability. Now I want to emphasize that desirability should always be your first stop. A lot of companies focus on feasibility, meaning I am going to try to build it first. Doesn't matter if you build it, or doesn't matter if you can build it if nobody wants it, okay? So always start with desirability, and if you have desirability, then you can move to the others. So what do the other ones mean? Viability means, can your product be profitable? Is the pain big enough that the customer would be willing to switch to your solution? Can you actually deploy it and operate it in a way that's going to be giving you the right margins? Okay, remember, B2B is really complex. Is the installation or the operation going to be too expensive, etc.? Right? So you have to analyze the willingness to pay from your customer, and then if you can actually have a business out of this idea. And the last thing is feasibility, meaning can you build, operate, and maintain the product? Notice that if you probably heard this feasibility term, usually in B2C, can you build it, right? Here, I want to go deeper because B2B, your customers expect more than just the product. Usually, you're engaging them with a long-term contract. So you need to be able to build it. You need to make the technology work. oftentimes you're going to have to operate that solution for them, or in the background, you need to be monitoring that it works. You need to be able to deploy it. Sometimes you realize that deploying the solution, installing it, especially if it's like an IoT solution with hardware, the cost just goes up and it's not doable. And then maintenance. Can you actually maintain your product moving forward? Okay. So when you think about feasibility, is everything around the technology, can you build it, operate it, and maintain it? So let's talk about how do you validate those without having to build a lot. And probably you heard the concept of experiments. Now, just for definition here, I define an experiment as any activity that reduces the risk by testing an assumption before building it. And the key here is the before, because when you actually engage your development team, then you want to be certain as much as possible that you're building the right thing. Because for any company, the engineering team is going to be one of the most expensive assets, not only because of how much they cost, but also because when they are building something that's not going to improve your profitability, the opportunity cost is tremendous. So it's better if the innovation/product team works on experiments, testing things, so that by the time it gets to development, you have a better chance of success, and then you're maximizing the utilization of your engineering team, which your executive leadership team will definitely appreciate. So I'm going to give you a few examples of experiment types, and in the workshop there's a lot more examples, but I'm going to show you a few that I have used in B2B specifically, because oftentimes we hear a lot about A/B testing and things like that, which those are very B2C heavy. So some of the ones that I've seen in B2B. Interviews, right? Interview is an experiment because it's a way of validating your assumptions before you actually build anything. And in B2B, being able to talk to your champion and your users and understand their pain and show them your potential solutions, then that goes a long way. So interviews is one of the key elements here. Surveys, it's just another way of getting their feedback in a broader way. And so earlier in the innovation journey, interviews and surveys are going to be really, really valuable. As you start moving into a solution, then you can use techniques as brochures or even landing pages. And what that means is that you are, let's say, creating a digital brochure, a PDF, that says this product is going to do A, B, and C, and it's going to cost this much. And then you start shopping it around with your champions in the target market that you have identified, and see if that solution would meet their need, what questions they have, what is it missing. And you don't have to build anything. It's just a brochure, right? You're just getting that feedback. It's an experiment. I've been in situations when I've shown that brochure and people want to give me a letter of intent to buy it. Then you know you're into something, right? But brochures is a very inexpensive way to validate something. One of my favorites is click-through prototypes, and these are just, simple PDF files. You can build them with a bunch of different tools, but basically simulate how you would advance through a specific application, and it lets your customer experience what the application flow would be and get that feedback. And you can put this in half an hour and iterate very quickly. You can move then to high fidelity prototypes that could include, full photoshopped images or even working prototypes. Pieces of software that are starting to be built because you're going in the right direction and allows users to test a few things, okay? Wizard of Oz is one of my favorites, and I cover a lot of that in the workshop, which is you provide the functionality behind the scenes, just like in the movie Wizard of Oz. The customer experiences the value of your product as if your product were delivering it. It's just that, you are doing it in the background. So in the book, I have examples about some advanced reporting where instead of building them, we just did them by hand in Excel and then make them pretty and email it to the customer. For the customer, it looks like the system is generating this, and we can get a lot of feedback as opposed to spending, 6 months building something and then the customer said, no, I don't like it, right? And then the last two, pre-sale and paid pilot, these are some of the experiments that will give you the most validation, because really you're looking for your customer to put their money where their mouth is. And if they really value your solution, they should be able to buy it. So you can actually do a pre-sale before the product is ready and see if they're willing to pay, or with a letter of intent. Or you can do a paid pilot or paid beta. And the moment they're putting some money, you know you're in the right direction. There's a lot more we can talk about experiments, and I do cover a lot more in the workshop, but I want to make sure I leave time for questions. Couple more things here. When you're working on your prototypes, to maximize the chances of success, the fidelity of the prototype should match the evidence you have, the amount of evidence. So for example, when you have very little evidence of whether what you're presenting is the right thing, use things like click-through prototypes, low fidelity prototypes, something you can put out very quickly. The more evidence that you get that you're on the right track, then you can do more like product development and start building working prototypes. And that's how you eliminate the risk of spending a lot of time developing something that nobody wanted. Okay, so your team, the innovation team, should spend a lot of time on the low evidence side of things. And once there's realistic evidence that this is something the customer would want, a feature, a flow, then you can start actually developing. Okay, so we've talked about these 4 areas. Of course, launching successful B2B products to market requires a lot of different things, a lot of moving parts, but I just wanted to point out some of the ones that I see come up all the time, right? The doubt on how to approach innovation that is not a black box, focusing on narrowing down one problem to solve, at least first, who are you solving it for, and how to reduce the risk of building the wrong product. Remember, in a minute, you'll get your innovation assessment that has a lot more depth into all the things that you need to do. And of course, on Monday, we launched the workshop, so you can enroll and learn all that in a lot of detail. But we're at the point that we can move on to the assessment. I think it's already in the chat. Very good. And that's it. I'll pass it back to you, Georgina.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Daniel. Daniel was correct. The assessment is waiting for you in the chat. So pop in there and download your version. It's a really wonderful visual walkthrough of how you can make a pretty complex concept like innovation really practical and actionable in your day-to-day. So I highly recommend that you utilize that awesome bonus in there. We are about to hop into Q&A. There are already a couple questions in there that are, inquiring minds want to know. But I am going to talk to you a little bit about our upcoming summit. And while I'm doing that, if you have any other questions, now is a really great time to put them into the Q&A box. So I am incredibly excited to share that Pragmatic Institute is going to be hosting our very first annual summit on the future of product management. So it'll be on September 18th. It's an opportunity to hear from a large wealth of industry leaders. You'll access insights and reports. There'll be some fresh data, networking, all sorts of really great opportunities for you there. So I really hope that you join us. It's free for you to join. And there's we're just gonna have a really great time. So I hope that I see you all there. Daniel, we can go ahead and pop off this slide now. And let's jump into some of these questions. I think that there's one question in here that is likely something that a lot of folks on the call are going to want to know. Our first question asker is curious about communicating value proposition to executives and also non-executives, right? Like, how do you translate the value prop of your idea, of your innovation to those very different groups? Because a technical group has different values, different tone, different style of communication from an executive group. So do you have any suggestions for us about how you can share the same information but translate it for those different audiences?
Of course, that's a great question. Before I answer that, there seems to be some folks having trouble with the assessment, just making sure that that we can download it. But so to answer the question, I think that's a really great question, because as I mentioned at the beginning, it's not only about understanding the market, it's about bringing your stakeholders along through the journey at every step of the way. And so what I advocate is, as you're moving through the innovation journey, and let's say through the B2B Innovators Map, right? You have stakeholder alignments, you have market discovery, user discovery. The transition to each of those stages is a great opportunity to communicate to your leaders what you have learned and how is it that help the overarching strategy of the company. And it really all starts with, what is the customer problem you're going to solve? And if you're able to articulate, hey, we are going to solve this problem for this customer and its particular target audience, these are their pains, and we can potentially build this solution that aligns with our overarching strategy, then you will get their attention. And then at that point, that needs to be for everybody, right? That idea from like the problem you're solving, the potential solution, how it aligns with your strategy. But then it diverges a little bit. Senior leadership is going to want to learn more about money, right? How is this going to affect profitability? What's going to be the cost? When is it going to be ready? Those kind of things. So the more you can articulate how this will impact profitability, and remember, you're early in the innovation journey, so you can't just BS them, right? You don't really know. But that's really what they care about, because the question in their heads, me having been in that position, is, what am I paying for? I am funding this innovation initiative. What am I going to get and when? So the more that you can articulate as you're going forward, what will be the benefit of doing what you're doing, you'll get a great reception from that team. Now, the engineering teams, they definitely need to understand the overarching problem you're solving for the customer and for whom and why and what's the benefit. But then you can go a little bit deeper into, and the solution that we're going to build is going to help the customer this way, talk more about the areas of the solution, the benefits, how it integrates new technology, right? They care about that aspect. And we didn't talk about the solution planning stage, but that's a way where you can actually diagram what a solution looks like, and you can have those conversations with your engineering team, right? So different message, different secondary message, but the first message, who are you solving for? What's the benefit and what's the benefit for the company, needs to be consistent for everybody.
Yeah, really great advice. There's another question here that's very similar, and I suspect you might say that the answer previously you gave will serve for this one as well, but I'm going to ask you in any case, because we're asking about advice on how to make your specific innovation strategy proposal stand out when your company has a lot of different competing priorities and you're trying to make it stand out to your stakeholders and your executives, so that's the one that they prioritize and fund. Do you have any particular advice there?
Yes, that's a great question, right? And I think the way that I've done it in the past is by aligning the strategy of the company. What does the company want to do in the next, 6 months to a year? And then what are some of the gaps in the market that are not going to let you get there from a company perspective? And then your proposal needs to be not a proposal of a product, but a proposal of a problem that you can solve that aligns with the strategy and opens a lot of doors. Because I think the mistake that a lot of innovators make, they come in pitching a solution. But at this point, as you saw from the B2B Innovators Map, that comes much later. So you need to pitch a solution once you have clear understanding of the customer pains. And so your approach needs to be, do some market discovery, define a target market, do some interviews, really get a sense of the pain and the opportunity from a business perspective. And that's how this initiative is going to rise to the top, because you can say, hey, this is strategically aligned. There's a market opportunity. I know we have a target audience. I've talked to customers. There is something here. We just need to actually execute the following steps of the innovation framework, right? You're on mute, I think.
Thank you very much. You saved me a couple minutes of confusion there. So thinking about the framework and the steps, one of our question askers really feels that the map and the approach to solve the problem makes a ton of sense in that phase of the process, the assessment. At a theoretical level, right? But do you have any suggestions for how to really pull that theory into practice and how you can execute it consistently? Because there's lots of questions here about managing executives, but the executives in particular and management, they're very susceptible, it sounds like in this asker's organization, to the whims of the shiny object, as well as their own biases and interests. So do you have any kind of tips or tricks that you've used to help bring management and leadership back to that principle and that kind of guiding path of the assessment?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think one of the biggest learnings that I've had, I was actually chatting with a chief product officer of a company that we're discussing these concepts. And he asked me a really interesting question, said, your book has been out for 2 years now. What have you learned working with companies with this, right? Throughout this time from the moment you published the book? And I would say one of the biggest learnings that I've had is you need a lot of executive support to perform any innovation initiative in a disciplined way. Because if you are an innovation team or innovation leader and you want to implement some of these approaches, yes, you can do that and you can work with your team, but you have a lot of convincing to the executives of why you're doing what you're doing, how are you going to do it. When I was VP of Innovation at Ericsson, 60-70% of my time was convincing executives of how we're going to do this, right? And so I think it's a two-part thing. Your company needs to agree with executive support that you want to do innovation in a very specific way. And that's why the number one point in the presentation was you have to agree on how you're going to do innovation, whether you do this method or another one. But then the company has to agree, executives have to say, yep, we support that. And then you can actually start pushing initiatives and ideas and proposals through some sort of a similar funnel. But now everybody kind of knows how it goes. Because if you have your idea of how it's going to be done, the CEO has a different idea and the VP of engineering has a different idea, you're not going to get anywhere, right? So that alignment on the how is crucial. And that usually goes to executive leaders to say, yeah, we are going to try this out and we're going to align and try it, right?
Yep. I like it. Good advice. And really good feedback in the chat here. People saying good answer as well. So thank you.
I know there's a lot of CEOs in the audience, and it's like,
that's right.
Am I being graded?
There's another question here that's a little bit different, and I think you're going to be really interested to answer it. So this asker is working in a product department that is compliance driven, and they are an internal B2B team. So their customers are other internal departments within the organization. Okay. They do not generate any revenue. And so knowing that information in that context, would you add or change anything to the message that you've shared today or to the process of the framework?
Yeah, that's a great question. I have had similar discussions before. I wouldn't change the overarching approach. What I would change is the discussion of the types of metrics that your product will impact. And so the same thing applies, right? What customer problem are you going to solve? And this time the customer is internal. And then who is responsible or accountable to solve that business problem internally? And then how can you deliver a solution to solve that need, right? It is a little bit of a balance because when you are internal, you have access to all the different stakeholders. So it's actually a lot easier to get the feedback and to do that discovery. The only thing that you have to be careful is to ensure that if your solution is going to be used throughout the organization, then you might have more than one customer. Otherwise, you might be just doing a one-off custom solution for that stakeholder, and that's fine. You still need to do the discovery and all that, right? But I think those are the different things. Is how does this impact the organization? What are they trying to do? And how would you help the organization with that challenge.
That's right. That's right. Really good advice. Thank you. I have another kind of interesting scenario for you to weigh in on.
Of course.
I'm going to read this one to you directly. So this asker is working on a product. We are working on a new 0 to 1 self-service data product. Our team needs the product functionality first in order to solve some problems that they have, while discovering the problems of the ultimate end user. So they have the ultimate end user in mind, but still need discovery in order to confirm that. They're asking you, is there a problem with us creating UI for us first as the user, and then modifying to scale to meet the ultimate end user's needs after? Do you think that that is a conflict of interest or distracting to the problem, or do you think that that is an appropriate approach?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. And one thing that I like to say in special innovation with B2B, there's no best practices, right? There's all our appropriate approaches. I think the way that I would think about this is thinking about what I call the user ecosystem. And of course, we didn't have time to go into the user discovery stage, which is something that I describe in a lot of detail in the workshop, where you have to identify all the different users that will touch your application. You have to prioritize them, and then you have to figure out what workflows you need to work on first in order to deliver value at this stage of your journey. So it is very possible, and in fact, I've done it before, where that core user might be an internal user. And without that internal user having the right tools, there's no way you could do anything else. So that's fine. Build it for that person, but don't fall in the trap that you're building a product for yourself, right? I think it's good to have those discussions and challenging those assumptions that you really need that, or how much do you need of that. But yeah, oftentimes, especially in complex applications, you have to do that all the time, right? You have to have some internal monitoring, internal deployment, internal things, because otherwise you won't be able to deploy anything to the customer. So I think it's perfectly fine just understanding all the different users and making sure that you don't lose track, that you're not building for yourself.
Yep. I think
Unless you
really
want to
good
pay.
validation. Yeah, really good validation for the asker, and then also some good advice and coaching for where to go from there. All right, you ready for another one?
Ready.
Okay. This is one that I think a lot of folks on the call are going to be able to relate to. This asker is having a really tricky time getting other departments to give the product team feedback in terms of problems. So what they receive from the rest of the organization is observations, preferences, and of course, suggested solutions. And so they're really struggling to have other people in the organization understand that the solutions are something that the product team and the development team are going to deliver back. It's the responsibility of that innovation team. What they really need as an input for that recipe is the problems. They're not getting the problems. Any advice about how you can start to coach and train the rest of your organization to deliver feedback in the context of problems?
Yes, it's an interesting one. And I think I think it's always tricky because you don't want to be seen as the person coaching others on how to do their job, right? I think you have to, it's a constant conversation with them, and it's about building trust. Let's say you're meeting with the VP of sales and they come in with special solutions. Have that discussion that, well, can you help me understand what the problem is? And then I think what the key is for them to understand, what do you do with that problem? And then that's why having a framework helps. It's like, oh, this problem, we're going to do more discovery, we're going to do prototypes, and we're going to give you a solution that you're going to be able to sell so you can make a club and get your new Rolex, right? And so understanding that, helping them understand the framework is very useful. The other thing that I advise is product teams and innovation teams should make an effort to go outside the company to get a lot of those problems. In B2B, it's particularly difficult because sometimes sales is the quote unquote gatekeeper of customers. And but in the course, I actually have a whole module on building your own what I call discovery networks, on how do you actually go out, engage with external people that meet the criteria of your target market. How do you nurture those relationships so that you can actually get feedback from the outside. And that you can start to use to educate or to collaborate with people internally to say, hey, look, I'm getting all this feedback. This is the kind of stuff I'm looking for. With this information, we were able to deliver this value and so on, right? It's a process. And one of the things that a lot of people struggle with when I have these conversations is that innovation is very complex because of the internal workings of companies. And so if you are leading innovation, you're a head of product, or a lot of your time is going to be devoted to manage the internal relationships and the stakeholders. And so if you have a team, the team is going to be doing that work, and your job is to keep that alignment and to do that, right? So
I really like that framing a lot, Daniel, that helps us remember that being in that situation is not necessarily a problem or an abnormality, but an expected part of the job. And that is just something that you don't have to fight it. You just know that that's part of the role.
And also understanding that it's coming from a good place, right? I think that the product discipline sometimes might get a little bit of a high horse of like, this is how we do things, and right. And it's like nobody outside of product understands what we do. We barely do ourselves. So, thinking about sales, thinking about marketing, they are our partners, engineering. And so they're coming from a good place. They have interest in serving their customers so the company can grow. That's what you're looking for. So we have to partner with them and figuring out how we deliver value to them ultimately, which is, again, how I can help you sell more, or how I can help you meet your quota in terms of marketing, or et cetera, right? So we are that. And that, I think, is very, very important leadership trait, right? It's building those relationships.
That's right. And I think also a wonderful high note to wrap us up on. We are here at the top of the hour, so a really great high note to end on. Folks, Daniel Elizalde, thank you so much for joining us. We have been delighted to learn from you today. Everyone today will receive an email. You'll get a recording of this call. We'll chat with you more about mastering B2B product innovation, the workshop that is coming out on the 29th. You'll also receive your PDF version of the assessment. Thank you so much for joining us. And Daniel, so grateful for you coming and being so generous with your knowledge. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure working with Pragmatic. You guys are super great. Excited about this partnership. And thanks everybody for coming and taking the time. Feel free to connect with me, continue the conversation, and happy innovation, everybody.
Happy innovation, everybody. Thank you, Daniel. Bye, guys.